the first time you see the deadbeat scenario is because we had no control over our women or our family being sent off to different places. So it's heavily rooted in that notion. Now, I'm saying this because I want to get to 1865 and now what we're dealing with, how it looks different, but it's the same because it's a stigma heaped on to us.
Let me know when I can jump in with
vaudeville.
Go. Let me know when I can bring up
vaudeville. Yeah, but it's all in it.
So the common, image of a pimp, right, is the shiny jacket, feather in his hat, leopard skin, whatever the case may be, and walking with this limp and a cane and being able to speak slick to women. That was a recurring character in vaudeville that white men dressed up as black men to portray.
Exactly.
So literally, we are acting out what they have designed for us to be. So in
a lot of ways, it reflected their lives, the white man life, how they treated their women.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Safe House, a podcast based on exploring masculinity from various perspectives. Masculinity seems to be defined by others with outside agendas. There's a need to have safe space conversations that everyone is allowed to witness. There have been certain misnomers that propel societal groups to assume that masculinity is a pejorative. We would like to invite the listeners into a judgment-free zone as various topics on the subject of masculinity are explored, researched, and expressed.
Welcome to Safe House. I'm brother Freddy Jones, A.K.A. Musab Yassir Bey, A.K.A. the Blue Collar Scholar. I'm here with my man.
Interesting, A.K.A. Jared.
Yeah, man. And we here on the second episode. We did the pilot.
Yeah.
It was smooth. We touched on etymology of masculinity.
We did.
We had a lot of brothers. We had a few brothers in here to give their take and ask questions on masculinity. But
absolutely,
we had to parse through the definition, the etymology, and the breakdown of it. So what I really wanted to do is kind of delve into masculinity from the Western patriarchal white male standpoint.
You have to.
Before we go into that, I want to enter this caveat. I am a black masculinist in this space. That means that I advocate for the rights and the needs of black male. I want to qualify. I'm not just any old masculinist. I'm a black masculinist. So in saying that, I want to say this. I want to say this because we're gonna have a lot of pushback in the space that we're in. We got because anytime black men come together to do anything, people have opinions.
Not one time in the history of America has systems been designed to push black masculinity. Not civil rights. Not the ending of Jim Crow. So you name it. No, absolutely. And I think it's a necessity.
I want to say this because certain things are going to be used against us for sound bites when the shit gets rolling. And we have enemies like Malcolm X said in the Ballad of the Bullet.
Look at you by the window.
Yeah.
I see you.
Yeah.
I see you.
So I want to say this. The purpose in my position in this space we're in is to underscore the colluding forces of black males' incessant oppression. I want to highlight the metastasizing effects of white supremacy and the stringent nature of black misandry in America. To employ black men to liaise politically, economically, socially with others as a duty to black boys and create a countervailing force against suppression, oppression here in America and abroad.
Okay.
Now, I'm saying this because I'm going off of the biblical pericope of Matthew 25, 40 through 45, right? Says that...
Let me get some of the smoke off you.
Okay.
Paperwork.
Whosoever you do to the least of your brothers and sisters, you do unto me. And since we're black men or the bottom caste of the bottom casted, it serves as the dialectic of my interest. That's where I want to sit that at. And just in case we have any pushback, you can always refer to the mission statement.
I love anticipating you are.
Yeah. So, we got things that we're into outside of this. We have other business ventures, and we're going to get some type of strife. And I don't want this to affect what we do outside of here, but I want to protect it by giving that caveat.
Oh, no, absolutely. And to the, I guess, few people that know me, I spend a lot of time mentoring. It's a huge part of my nonprofit presence in the community, and I believe wholeheartedly in it.
That's why I got love for you.
Yeah, and I feel like, we have a saying in an organization that I go through for mentoring, which is they'll be what they see. And if you push a dogma and you think your dogma or your perspective on life is important, then do something with it, which is to influence others. And if you aren't doing that, then I would definitely make a call to do that.
It remind me of you saying that. Remind me of that Aristotle quote: "Show me a boy at 7, I'll show you the man." You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We left off last time because I want to really parse out this masculinity thing before we move on to its obverse feminism.
Absolutely.
I want to really drill down on this masculinity topic. So last time we went over R.W. Connell, A.K.A. R.W.S. Connell, A.K.A. Raywin Connell. And what I didn't get to express last time because we took questions and whatever. Sure. But Raywin Connell is from Australia, a sociologist. Yeah. Well, we didn't get to tell him that he's a transgender.
Oh, no. I mentioned that on that
woman.
last episode.
Okay.
For sure.
So that's important. I thought that was interesting.
Oh, no, I think it's hella important. But I mean, who better to know white men than someone who was born?
And I thought that's why I was interested.
Yeah, for sure.
But the work that Raywin Connell did is a lot. It's a point of reference to a lot of brothers in this space because Raywin Connell, she, to be politically correct, wrote a few different things, and we touched on hegemonic masculinity. Before we went there, we went to compensatory masculinity, which Karen Holmes, Joyce Williams wrote in the Second Assault or Rape and Attitudes when they went at black men, and they used compensatory masculinity to describe black men. We went through that. Raywin Connell was hegemonic masculinity. Then we touched on toxic masculinity.
And it's important because I think before she undertook that task of going through that research, it just wasn't readily available.
Exactly.
And so a lot of people latched onto the research because it wasn't really being produced.
Yeah.
And there's a reason it wasn't being produced because there really is no way to describe modern masculinity without Western influence. And so it's a huge thing to bring in that Western influence and Eurocentric. But what they were able to do, specifically talking about white feminism, was to quote and take bits and pieces of it and masquerade it as their own. But they weren't really listening to the whole particular perspective, which is essentially there is a northern hemisphere and a southern hemisphere version of masculinity, and one is toxic and one is not. And you can definitely use your brains and figure out which one is not.
But that was my thing. So when we went to toxic masculinity, I was showing that it was used as a cudgel now versus what it meant with the mytho-poetic males movement, who coined the phrase.
Mythos, yeah.
And she took the phrase and implemented in her work. Now I want to move on, but I do want to say this about Raywin Connell. If you want to get her work, she has a piece in '87 called "Gender and Power: Society, the Person, and the Sexual Politics."
Please
That's
check
'87.
it out.
Masculinities, and they got another edition from '95. She has a book called "Margin: Becoming Center" and "Hegemonic Masculinity: Rethinking the Concept," and that's an essay. But the interesting thing about Raywin Connell is when she spoke of masculinity, she was saying that black masculinity was not a part of the framework she 100%. Was talking about. She was imploring people to look at black men that they should look to us because we had a more egalitarian way of masculinity versus the Western or white man way of masculinity.
Absolutely counterproductive.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So I want to put that out there, and I want to turn the page. So
real quick too, I think if you add a little more on to that, you could say that the existence of Southern Hemisphere masculinity or black masculinity caused an aggressive form of hegemony masculinity from Eurocentrism. They saw us and thought, damn, this is not what we have set up. We really have to hyperspeed our perspective and our way of life onto the world. Yeah. When the presence of us sped them up throughout history. When you look at their timeline, they move much more slowly through progression throughout history. You're talking about thousands of years, if not 100,000s of years. And then they meet us, and then shit gets done in a century. Yeah. And it's important because I think that presence let them know that they were not the all or be all of what masculinity looks like.
So, which is going to drive us to patriarchal masculinity in the West. Masculinity, the white version, is and has always been rooted in...
And I'm going to say Eurocentric, but...
Yeah. Eurocentric masculinity comes from the aristocracy of Europe. Absolutely. Coming here, it becomes landowner masculinity, meaning you had to have that paper.
Live all the way live, I bet you never knew that Houston, we in the house. So where we from, Houston.
This is Flash Gordon Parks, you're listening to Soul One, peaceofmind.com.
At the Constitution, it was about motherfuckers that had money or land, who has paper. So, to be honest and to be fair, the concept of masculinity that's heaped upon us now was always viewed as white patriarchal landowners, and everybody else was not a man, from Jewish people to slaves. I mean, we were the bottom of the bottom. But when you had land, you were considered masculine.
We should probably do this on an episode and talk about how Eurocentric or European Jews picked out property as a way of establishing authority. Because I think that's a huge piece to what we're talking about. But yeah, like absolutely, it's property. I mean, that's why you have.
But that's
license.
important.
It's to transport women.
But property was the main thing in the Constitution.
Absolutely,
you know what I'm saying? It was all about property,
rights and ownership.
Now, when you're talking about Western patriarchal standards, it was all about the man leading the household, and when they refer to patriarchy, they're talking about womanizing white men. That ruled in a certain type of way. Now, I don't want to create little holes for white women to get out of. They bathe in the blood money, like Bill Burr said on this SNL skit. The whole goal of
Bill Burr.
The entire goal of patriarchy, white patriarchy, it was a cooperative. White women were down with it. like Pac said, to all them niggas that was down with it.
And I'm not gonna all for full-fledged agree with that, because I do think there are pivotal women who rebelled against it. Joan of Arc, you name it. There's multiple women who definitely rebelled, but from a large perspective, yeah, I agree that at some point they adopted it, and that's
why I qualified it by saying the land owning. I'm saying all the land owning men who had women in their rank and who were being womanized and who were treated, in a certain way, they understood that they give up something for something else, because everything that white man did in terms of getting land, it was for them to prosper, to be able to have access to their womb, reproduction, to propagate themselves.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
they were definitely down with the program, and then they jump ship with feminism, but that's a whole nother, we'll get into that later.
For sure.
But I want to talk about how that concept and how Western patriarchal notions treated black men in that concept, in that whole entire experience. So during slavery, nobody was considered a man. Everybody was other than, especially when you talk about the Catholic Church. I mean, that gave them the impetus to enslave us, because we were infidels. We were not human. We were subhuman. And a lot of the, I guess the stigmas
that descendants of Ham?
Yeah. Then that was their whole concept of keeping us enslaved. But that rooted them into doing what they did and to paint out the African being a beast, the African being a savage, the unintelligent.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So in that framework, before you get to 1863, 1865, the African was backwards. That's why you're enslaved, nigga. The African had no homeland or no roots. You know what I'm saying? The African was less than a man. He was emasculated. He was, you know what I'm saying? Like, they had control over the family and how it was moved.
Absolutely.
And the first time you see the deadbeat scenario is because we had no control over our women or our family being sent off to different places. So it's heavily rooted in that notion. Now, I'm saying this because I want to get to 1865 and now what we're dealing with, how it looks different, but it's the same because it's a stigma heaped on to us.
Let me know when I can jump in with
vaudeville.
Go. Let me know when I can bring up vaudeville.
Yeah, but it's all in it.
So the common, image of a pimp, right, is the shiny jacket, feather in his hat, leopard skin, whatever the case may be, and walking with this limp and a cane and being able to speak slick to women. That was a recurring character in vaudeville that white men dressed up as black men to portray.
Exactly.
So literally, we are acting out what they have designed for us to be. So in
a lot of ways, it reflected their lives, the white man life, how they treated their women,
and then slave life, right? Like, you're talking about breeding houses where black men were forced to breed multiple women, and not only that, if you could not breed, you were considered less than a man, and they castrate you.
Yeah.
So those are very important things that line up. You're talking about. See, people, I think, oftentimes just don't really fathom time. But when you have 300 years of that, you're talking about 6, maybe 7 generations of back-to-back indoctrination of the same ritual. Eventually, that it impregnates the brain.
Yeah,
for sure.
No, but I get that. This was important, and the reason why in slavery, why it was important for them to heap that onto us, because it made for good policy. It determined how men voted, because they'll use that to be able to, when we get out of slavery, to say, okay, he thinks like this, he shouldn't deserve to vote, or he, whatever the case may be, to exercise of a certain thing. Because none of this shit was done haphazardly. It was it always was angling towards something.
Oh, absolutely.
So when we get this notion of masculinity, I want to point out something. And I was reading The Sweet and Bitter Science of Gerald Horne. And something was very jumped out at me when I opened up the book.
Horne.
He
Dr.
said
Horne.
exactly the griot. He says, quote, "The U.S. plantation slavery was notorious for the arranging of fighting contests among enslaved in particular, where masculinity was honed." And it goes into sports, or how we duel to the death And that was our version of masculinity on how we performed in front of him.
No different from Roman Empire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's how it was seen. So when you look at that, you see the early points of competition, force, using force.
Physical.
Yeah, strength. That was our version of masculinity. So when he said hone masculinity, I was like, okay, that's interesting. Because it came out of the dynamic of slavery. Yeah. Because everything that you see when you're reading our existence in slavery, it was always in competitive.
The slavery's existence is purely physical, right? Yeah. Like, how long can you be out in the fields? How long can you pick? How much can you pick? It's a very physical, demanding type of focus that, encourages breeding on the physicality of it all. Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah.
But I thought that was interesting because it kind of tracked the professions we went into. You get what I'm saying?
No. Explain that.
Because our first professions were entertaining.
Oh,
you get what I'm saying? Sure. And so the notion of our social standing came off of fighting or entertaining the slave master and building this type of beef towards each other. Yeah, exactly. Sure. So it reminded me of how the jobs we were tracked into too. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? The life risking jobs.
And I think that even points to one of the most profound books I've ever read, my freshman year at FAM. It's called Are Prisons Obsolete by Angela Davis. And she talks about how we were basically ushered in from slavery into the penal system. And in the penal system, we had to do very physical, demanding labor because that was one of the scarcest things to find, right? So building railroad, deforesting, you name it. We did it all. And a lot of that fixed our brains to what we have now adopted to be in masculinity, which is physicality, which is
sacrifice.
Not chess, that's checkers. Yeah, for sure.
So true. So when we talk about masculinity, I think from a universal standpoint that we can probably agree on is
maybe.
Yeah, I mean, from masculinity, pure masculinity is a man sacrificing for his family, a man providing for his family. But when you get to like the sports or entertainment thing, what I found that it tracked us into certain jobs. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like the most high risk, dangerous, life-threatening jobs. And I think we did a lot.
Live all the way live, I bet you never knew the Houston. We in the house. So where we from? Houston.
This is Flash Gordon Parks. You're listening to Soul One. PeaceOfMind.com.
touched on a really important word there, sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
Like, so our masculinity is defined by how much we restrict our access to joy. That's weird. No other being does that. Like, why should we have to curb our joy? If we have too much joy, we aren't being masculine. So if we aren't sacrificing, if we aren't laying down on the line, if we aren't in a danger, then we aren't masculine. That is insane.
Yeah,
that's not human.
That's where it come. That's where it come from. That's why I say it gets distorted at a certain point.
For sure.
So I want to point out this guy named James Patterson. And I'm always referring to the Kerner Commission and the Moynihan Report. I want to urge, I want to exhort brothers to read that. Man. And the reason why you got to read the Kerner Commission, because you see where the affirmative action come from. But in the Kerner Commission, it was stating that when the riots were happening and they killed King and we were burning down cities, that they were saying that the people who were doing the rioting and who was upset the most, it wasn't the women, it was the black men. Between a certain age of 16 and like 23, these were the people that were boxed out of education, who was upset, but they were at that time in the mid 60s, they were more politically aware than we are now.
Yeah, and I think it's important too to announce that effort that, you know, Eurocentrism has been trying to divide black men and black women for a long time. Yeah. So they're always throwing things against the wall to see what sticks. But yeah, that's just one of the many things that they have done to try and divide us.
And so that's why I keep harping back to it. So James Patterson was a journalist. He wrote a book about the Moynihan Report, observing the Moynihan Report. Mm-hmm. Now I want to put this out there, that the Moynihan Report was shut down by feminists because it was a certain point in the Moynihan Report where he said, well, wait, maybe we should, because it was so matriarchal, maybe we should give some of these jobs from black women to black men, you know, because we would need to give them a boost because they live in a society that is patriarchal, and we can have a subset of matriarchy in it and have them at the bottom and getting ran by their women, because we set up a system to where, hey, a welfare system that the women, and they have to lead their women to be able to get the welfare. So maybe we should give the jobs to the men and quit giving jobs to women. And that's what made the feminists come out and, you know, remonstrate against it. But James Patterson wrote a book called Freedom is Not Enough. And it was about the Moynihan Report and the struggle against the black family. It says from LBJ to Obama, because he was a big critic of Obama. And in the book, he's talking about what LBJ did versus what Obama did. But one thing that caught my attention is, you know, citing the statistics on the black family breakup. And he was pointing to Moynihan reports. He said blacks, because of whites, had a distorted masculine image that led them to flaunt their maleness, help inflate the high numbers of out-of-wedlock births.
Yeah, I think that's got some merit, but I also think it's the culture of 1866, right?
That's like, what I'm saying.
You coming straight out of the slavery and from the breed barns to regular life, you were not encouraged to have an emotional connect with women, and so, you know, that's and that goes both ways. Women were set up as breeding grounds too. Exactly. So, you know, you got your freedom, which isn't, you know, I don't think it's talked about enough, but women got their freedom based on how many children they bear. Exactly. And so if you bared about 3 to 4, you had earned your freedom.
So you got the notion of...
they have an encouragement to try and breed as often as possible.
So that's why I like that he said, because of black white men, we had a distorted image of masculine. No, you know what I'm saying? We had a distorted image of masculinity.
I know that you love that phrase.
No, because they're you know, they're the devil. They're the devil. Sure. They're the devil to me. That's my words. But what I'm saying is, he was saying that because of their view of white masculinity, this is what caused the attachment to slavery. Sure. You know, the buck or the stud or whatever the case may be. Sure. But they seen this as a way of flaunting their manners of having kids. That's his perspective. A lot of Moynihan Report information came from Kenneth Clark, the Dark Ghetto. And he was a he was a very popular sociologist and brother. Clark, yeah, it came came from W.B. Du Bois' work and everything that was rooted in slavery. But they was breaking down how can we help black people. And Moynihan was like, well, we have to uplift black men, and that's when they shut down the whole project. So now he act like he didn't write it because they got so down on him that LBJ just made jettison of the project. because they was like, well, they had so many problems with so many points of it because he was talking about uplifting black men. Because he said, man, we can have a subculture that's ran in a matriarchy when this whole thing is patriarchal. They not gonna survive. How are we gonna have a small subset of subaltern group ran by women because we manufactured this through redlining or whatever and not being able to get them jobs and you know what I'm saying?
And a little deeper than that even, I would imagine it's because they also knew that, frankly, black women as a culture, no matter what period you point at, is not going to conform to the docility in the household like a European woman would.
Yeah.
It's not their nature, it's not their history, it's not their bloodline.
Yeah. And I think that we had a lot of friction with black women because of the access they had and out of the frustration that they had because of I watched documentaries of Atlanta about black women putting out APBs for their husband because they just up and left because they couldn't get jobs, they were boxed out and they couldn't afford to to stay with the family.
And I'm a representative of that. My grandfather, absolutely.
Yeah.
He left Texas.
But federal government would take care. But federal government would take care of him. So they would have these conversations with women. They're like, no, don't go. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But to be able to survive, they had to leave. So it was a lot of APBs put out on black men, and so that carried over to the stigma of the, you know what I'm saying, the deadbeat dad when the original deadbeat is the white man because he bastardized. He had a lot of mixed,
and I think the underlying thing that you can get from anything you and I say to the public is that the lack of resources forces an action that is unnatural to human beings, but they have to do whatever it can to survive. Yeah. So if you aren't providing jobs as a government as you're supposed to do, as the taxes you're taking in, men are going to leave to try and find their piece of peace, their prosperity. And so that's a huge piece to being a human, the human experience. And so here you got like the government not providing opportunities, men leaving to try and find that, and then being demonized for it, like they didn't do that in the gold rush, or that they didn't do that in
the Great Depression, when they were living on river banks and stuff. But I just find it very interesting because I have a take, just a sidebar, I have a take on Dr. Umar. And even with the Moynihan report, when he proffered the Moynihan report, he got a lot of flack from black women and white feminists. Well, black women being goaded by white feminists, being marionetting black women, because that's what they did. They marionetted. Mm-hmm. But what I noticed about Dr. Umar, and we can say what we want to say about Dr. Umar, opinions vary. But what I noticed about studying Dr. Umar is the problem that he encountered, even beyond the stripper thing or whatever, when he said, I wanted to make a school strictly for black boys, the left, black, Democratic women went crazy, and he explained.
That's a very interesting.
And
piece of the pie that you grabbed.
And he was like, "What the fuck?" Like, but he explained his position because, like the space we're trying to create, he said black boys work better if we can get them together, teach them. You know what I'm saying? Prepare them.
And just speaking from my own personal experience, right? Anecdotal.
Yeah.
I belong to organizations, not only but some that are purely black men centric, and the importance for that is that within our structure there is more weight that's put on males, specifically black males, to provide for their family beyond just their domicile. Yeah. And so the time and the effort to even give outside of that is very scarce. And so in a lot of organizations where women are present, they don't feel as though they can compete or that they can even have a voice. And so in our organizations where we're able to do that, we've seen contributions where they would not have ordinarily been. And that's important.
Really?
It's super important. Absolutely, we've seen it. Absolutely. Because in other spaces, guys would feel as though they got to shy away from involvement, or such and such is doing all of that, so I don't have a space. We create a space and we say, hey, you find a vacancy, you feel it, period. You find a vacancy, you feel it.
Live all the way live, I bet you never knew the Houston. We in the house. So where we from? Houston.
This is Flash Gordon Parks. You're listening to Soul One. PeaceOfMind.com.
I found a clip that I was. It just made me laugh. One of the brothers.
You laugh?
Yeah, one of the brothers' wives from the Black Panther movement. What was the dude that was gay? Man, they say he was
a Panther.
Yeah, he was messing with Little Richard. What's the guy's name?
No idea.
He had a wife, and she was being interviewed. What's her name? I forgot to write it down. But
okay.
Anyway, I'll come back with it. But anyway,
let's definitely revisit that. It's interesting as hell.
But it's reminding me of what you're saying.
Okay.
That the spaces that the Panthers had. So she was being interviewed by a feminist, which she didn't know at first. Mm-hmm. It was the rationale of a question. So she went through all these little questions about her experience in the Panther Party. And then when they got to who cooked for the Panthers? She was like, what? She's like, well, who cooked? He's like, well, the men were the best cooks, but we don't play that feminist. Like, what do you mean by that? Where is this question coming from? So she grilled this woman, and the woman started backpedaling. Right? She said, well, look, this is what basically this is what we're not gonna do. In the Black Panther Party, we had but in the Black Panther Party, we had spaces like you're talking about. Mm. You know what I'm saying? Whatever you do best for the movement, you do. But we didn't play that gender role or whatever the case may be. It was some men that were chef. It was certain, You
can keep it super simple. My grandfather-in-law, right? He served in World War II. He's a cook. There were no women who cooked for all these soldiers.
Exactly.
Man, like that's not a feminine trait.
Exactly.
To provide sustenance.
It goes back into that
family.
gender role, that stigma on gender roles. But she was saying to her that we did. Matter of fact, she was saying that we had more women in the Black Panther movement than any other movement, than King's movement, than what we offered up a space for, contrary to what you believe. But it was a ploy or a tactic to kind of be divisive. Or
let's make sure people read up on that to make sure that because that's a huge statement.
Yeah,
I think that's very important because you're talking about a very militant organization. Yeah. Where women are bountiful compared to other spaces.
Exactly.
And even that energy is considered masculine when it isn't.
When it isn't. Yeah, exactly. That's the misnomer.
Yin and yang. It goes both ways.
Yeah, yeah. It was a lot of important key figures in the Panther Party that were women too.
Absolutely.
But I guess the point that I was bringing up about Dr. Umar is the flack that he received is when he had the idea for the, and if you notice that it kind of he kind of abandoned that. Now he's on some other shit. Now they have problems about the school or whatever, but if you notice, the school is not about black boys anymore, because initially when he was talking about building the school, it was for black boys, and they ran down on him.
I still thought it was under that same.
But they ran down on him, and now he comes to this black woman, queen, God of mothers, goddess earth,
and it's interesting. Because I think there is a different set of opinions across the diaspora of people. There are black mothers, right, that have sons that are wholeheartedly about spaces where their black boys can be black boys and learn together and fellowship together and promote each other's achievements, etc. So clearly, right, like there is a want for that even from the quote unquote opposite sex. So where they get that information from seems very manufactured. It doesn't seem real. Yeah.
But I kind of wanted to swing back to the stigma of black men. A lot of this came from black or white patriotism, their idea of masculinity, how it was funneled down to us with toxic masculinity. And a lot of people don't know that toxic masculinity, where it came from. And now they're using it as a cudgel. And then it's used against us now. You know what I'm saying? Like we're the targets of it. And they're not knowing because they don't engage the literature. Like you were saying, they will quote different things, but they hadn't engaged the literature to understand what these terms come from.
And we've talked about this. Like that's part of the game, right? Like Eurocentrism through the Western Hemisphere is always preached. Call someone what you are called. And they're very good at that. And so I'm not shocked that that's what they hit us with, is that you guys are the supreme owners of sexism. And it's like, no, we're not. We didn't own that. We don't historically own that. We don't culturally own that. That was adopted. We got that bred into us. And even then, it's just a whole different perspective in terms of when you put the whole history behind it. If you only look back 800 or 1,000 years, okay, then that's a perspective you could hold. But if you look back 10,000 years, no, it's not. We've been had queens. They didn't have queens. They were new to that game. We've been had queens.
For sure.
Yeah, like having a woman in charge didn't extract your masculinity out. Like you can serve a queen and still be the manliest man on the block. Like it didn't work like that. But like when you are probably, in a lot of words, considered the most recessive, right, of the hierarchy, you're going to act out in that manner. And so you're going to do everything you can to assert power. And that's what we see today, in my opinion.
Well, I want to save some for later.
Sure.
The next go around, I want to touch on the law of coverture. The intro to feminism. But I wanted to. We needed to do this to drill down on the concept of masculinity.
Absolutely.
But
I think it's important too because we disagree on a number of different subjects.
And this is where it's coming.
But we have to level set for where we're going
because it's coming.
Because we still operate from the same basis points. If you can't discuss or argue from the same base, the same floor, then what the heck are you arguing?
So we need to start with our perceived differences or perceived what we agree on. But the next go around, we'll touch on
trying to give y'all a master class on arguing. No,
we're going to get into feminism, but we're going to start with the law of coverture, the hub or the matrix of feminism.
We have to. All right, we have to.
I'm Freddy Jones, A.K.A. Brother Musab Yasebe, A.K.A. the Blue Collar Scholar.
And I'm just interesting.
And that wraps up the second episode of Safe House.
Yeah, it's second. We in jail.
Church.